Hello, and welcome back to What If the DISVENTURE Camp Season 1 cast was in Season 4. We're now entering the merge, so let's get straight into it. Episode 14, In Deep Water. The episode starts with Ellie and Natalia sulking after Gabby's elimination. Ellie complains about Fiore and Alec flipping on them, with Natalia agreeing, saying they'll get revenge for her. Though in confessional, admits she doesn't like the child and Alec either, but they were smart for taking out Gabby. Alec really is a silent genius, isn't he? Will is in the woods alone, trying his best to overcome his fears on his own now. He jumps at the sight of Spider, but soon realizes it won't do any harm. He smiles to himself, saying he's getting a hang of this, and thanks Ashley and Lil as he walks off, no longer as scared as he was before. Later, both teams are gathered on a pirate ship as Derek and Trevor announce the teams will be merging, and as an added bonus, they'll get pajamas. The hosts then explain the challenge, a treasure hunt into the depths of the lake. The contestants have to pair up and dive for treasure, and the winning pair gets immunity. Pairings that would happen are Alec and Fiore, Amelie and Gret, Tom and Jake, Natalia and Ellie, which leaves Will and Nick. Derek further explains the challenge. The pairs must cut the lifeboats on the ship loose. Once they do, they must paddle to a buoy checkpoint where Trevor will provide maps. One person must dive into the lake and the other must guide them using the tablet. And the first team to bring back a chest wins, as well as a chance to keep a special item for each contestant. Each duo brings down their lifeboats and gets to the water. The divers for each duo are Alec due to Fiore not being strong enough to lift the chest, Amelie because Gret jumped into water already to get the vote advantage, Jake because Tom would rather not get wet, Ellie because she volunteered, and Will due to Nick being stuck up and refusing, making Will go even if he's terrified. During the diving, Fiore guides Alec through the caves. They make small talk, where Alec asks Fiore about her home life, which Fiore shrugs off, calling the nuns dumbasses and saying she needed to get out of there ASAP. She asks the same question back, which leads to Fiore giving Alec a reality check, saying winning this show isn't going to fix his marriage. Amelie and Gret gossip together, laughing at their spot in the game. Then they talk about their jobs, which ignites jealousy within Gret as Emily talks about her company. She looks disappointed as Emily keeps talking. She cuts her off, saying she gets it. Amelie pauses and scoffs at the rude comment. Tom and Jake talk about what Gret said. Tom looks worried as Jake gets more and more suspicious of him. The silence from Tom feeds Jake's paranoia until Jake pleads for the truth. He can tell him everything, just don't hide himself from him. Tom sighs and says this isn't the time. Jake asks when it is the time, and Tom says after the challenge. Jake reluctantly agrees. As Ellie's diving, Natalia looks around for who to make an alliance with. In the original, she makes an alliance with the girls here, but I doubt she trusts half the girls here to stay loyal to it. So, instead, she approaches Tom. She asks for an alliance with him and Jake together with her and Ellie. Tom accepts after asking Jake, who also agrees. Natalia cheers, telling Ellie about the alliance. Will and Nick aren't talking much. Well, Will is more talking to himself, reassuring himself that he's got this as he swims through the water and enters a cave. Will then asks Nick for directions. Nick is just sunbathing on the boat, seeming relaxed until Will talks to him. He takes a glance on his tablet and says to go right. Will is annoyed at Nick's attitude. The chest then gets found by Jake, who then gets it stolen by Amelie. Alec manages to snatch it from her after a scuffle, but Ellie and Will block his path to get back up as Amelie and Jake come swimming back. A big scuffle in between the five happens, but Will stays out of it, which turns out to be the best strategy as the chest drops to the ground, allowing Will to snatch it and swim back up. Will and Nick win immunity. Nick gains a gossip magazine with his own face on the cover. Meanwhile, Will gets a family photo. Will looks at this and smiles to himself before Nick ruins it. They then get to choose another duo to gain their items too. Before Will can even speak, Nick has already given the reward to Amelie and Gret. This annoys Will even more as he was going to propose giving it to Tom and Jake. Trevor tells them they're being moved to a new camp to start fresh. Tom and Jake meet up again, with Jake asking Tom about the secrets he's been keeping from him. But before anything can be discussed, Gret approaches them. She excuses Tom for a bit before taking him away, leaving Jake dumbfounded and even more suspicious. Gret tells Tom who they're voting, and Tom agrees, looking back at Jake, who's sitting on a stump looking sad. Alec and Fiore approach Will, and Alec congratulates him on his win and asks if he's still in on the vote tonight. Will hesitantly agrees. In confessional, Will says he needs to make new alliances. He doesn't want to stick to Fiore and Alec anymore. Will later approaches Nick and asks to talk game, but Nick scoffs, saying he doesn't care, he's immune. Will sighs and asks what he did to earn it, and Nick shrugs, saying he didn't need to earn it. Will then breaks. He grabs Nick by the collar and gets in his face, saying he got them that immunity, and he sat there doing nothing. The only reason he's still in the game is because he's a cockroach, and absolutely nobody here likes him. If he stays as stuck-up and annoying like this, he'll be the next to go, and he'll make sure of it. He then lets him go, sighs, and walks off, looking conflicted with himself, before smiling, clearly proud of himself, and leaving a shocked Nick behind. The elimination ceremony arrives. People have talked game, or just sat there hoping to be pulled into a vote, but in the end, in a vote of 6-2 to 1-1, Amelie is eliminated. Amelie is shocked and looks over and asks how they could do this. She stares daggers at Gret, and Gret says it was a game move. She was getting too strong. Amelie scoffs as she turns her head away and walking off without another word. In confessional, Gret admits it may have been an emotional vote, but it worked out. What she said was true. Amelie was just piggybacking off of her success. Jake in confessional wonders why Tom is acting like this. He needs to find out what's been going on. Episode 15, Fright Night. Nick walks up to Natalia and offers an alliance. Natalia is surprised at Nick's unusual politeness and agrees, but asks what happened. Nick says nothing happened at all, he's just playing the game. Natalia gives him a slight side-eye. In confessional, Nick says how he's still in this game and he can't sit around expecting everyone to give him things like how Will gave him immunity. He is going to take control over the game. Gret approaches Fiore and Alec and asks to work with them, telling Fiore they can strike back up their old alliance. Fiore's act is still on as she asks if they ever stopped being in an alliance. Gret falters a little before denying. In confessional, Fiore says Gret isn't loyal at all. Neither is she, but it's good to know. Ellie spots a soaking Jake and debates going up to him. In confessional, she admits she sucks at cheering people up, but if it can help her getting an ally, she'll give it a try. She walks up to Jake and asks what's up. Jake confides in Ellie, saying that he's having issues with Tom, and he's very distant all of a sudden. He sighs before switching the topic and asks if she just wants to talk. Ellie agrees. In confessional, she says that was the easiest as it could get. That night, the contestants are gathered at a Stawaki Carnival haunted house. Derek and a frightened Trevor explain the challenge. The contestants have to go through 3 rooms of the mansion, and the first person to escape wins immunity. Will looks terrified as Nick slides up next to him, giving him a fake big smile and saying he can do this. Will's fear gets suppressed as he's just more confused at Nick's switch in attitude. Nick then tells everyone to just follow him. Once inside, everyone gets teleported into a library where candles light up and start floating. Jake spots a door, but as Alec gets closer, he notes they need to combine a code to open it as the candles start flying at them. In the library section, Ellie, Will, Nick, and Gret find numbers. The contestants run towards the door, but as they do, Jake gets hit in the head by one of the flying books, which knocks him clean out. Ellie and Tom look back, but only Tom runs back to help him. Fiore sees this and locks the door, trapping both Jake and Tom out. The rest find a lock with 3 keys. Ellie suggests splitting up to find the keys in different rooms. Alec asks Ellie to team up, which surprises her, but she accepts. Fiore tells Gret is with her, so Natalia, Will, and Nick are left to go together. Alec and Ellie walk into the toy room. Ellie asks him why he wanted to go with her, and Alec says he understands they aren't on the best terms right now, as, well, he voted out Gabby, but he'd still like to work with her. If Gabby stayed, they would have been too strong together. Ellie listens and tells him she'll think about it. They then get swarmed by a bunch of rats. Gret and Fiore walk into the next room. Fiore tells Gret what's up with Jake and Tom. Gret chuckles and explains about Tom being a spy and them becoming a couple. Fiore listens intently as they stand on some loose planks, which gives way soon after Gret finishes speaking, making two of them fall. Gret falls on top of Fiore, who complains about her crushing her, making Fiore's mask slip. Gret quickly gets off, stunned at Fiore's words. Fiore yells at her as she lays there but gets cut off when the pentagram she's laying on also breaks. Nick, Natalia, and Will walk into the third room, seeing a bunch of glass panels. Will's terrified, saying this was never in his training sessions with Lil Ashley. Natalia reassures him, saying it'll be fine, they can only go one way. Will isn't very reassured. Nick then says they should go one by one. Natalia then asks him why he's so chipper, and Nick admits Will told him something that made him think. He can't let other people decide his game, he should be the one to do that. While he is rich, and he is successful, and he does have a huge house, he can't stop being successful in a game like this. Natalia gives an impressed, wow, as Will says that's great to hear. In confessional, Will is ecstatic that he managed to help someone, and that with yelling at him. Will, now with newfound confidence, says this glass bridge won't stop him, until it does and he falls through, which terrifies Nick. Natalia says they need to keep on moving, otherwise they'll both fall. They keep going until Nick trips, making him grab onto Natalia, which sends her through a glass panel into the abyss. Gret reunites with Alec and Ellie with the key. Nick joins them and Gret gives a snide comment about how Nick, of all people, was making it through. Nick scoffs and says he's just a good player. The four contestants unlock the door and head to the final room, which is full of voodoo dolls, skulls, and a damaged and discarded ordinary girl doll with a knife. Ellie points out the door is blocked with rope, and Gret suggests grabbing the knife from the door. As she speaks, Nick bumps into the chair the doll was sitting on because he got spooked by something and it wakes it up. This causes an all-out brawl between the four and the doll. The shot of Spencer and Isabel would happen this time, but it's with Nick and Gret this time. Gret tells him to let go, remember what he owes her, and Nick refuses, saying he's not her fucking puppet anymore. Alec would assist Gret in taking the knife from Nick, telling Gret to go for the door. Ellie is seen standing by, not wanting to attack the woman with a knife. Gret manages to win immunity. After the challenge, Nick gathers Will, Natalia, Jake, Tom, and Ellie to suggest voting out Fiore. Everyone questions him why. Fiore isn't the smartest here and won't win any physical challenges. Nick says to just listen to him, he's got a plan. Ellie questions this further and asks what his plan is. He hesitates, looking around awkwardly, and Jake says he's got nothing. He says he'll think about it, and Ellie and Jake walk off, which causes everyone to walk off. Will saying it just isn't the right move. In confessional, Nick says this was his chance to make a move and no one listens. Don't they know how good it is? Because with Fiore gone, Gret has one less ally. That's all he's got. Tom is seen sitting alone in the woods, about to report once again, but before he can call, he receives a call instead. He picks up and hears he's getting fired as Jake had exposed him on camera on being a spy during the carousel episode. Tom asks how, and his boss says he got a video from one of the producers. Tom is upset. Will approaches Fiore and Alec. Alec asks what's up, and Will tells him about Nick's plan. Alec is surprised that he'd go for Fiore, and Will shrugs, saying he knows about Fiore and Gret's alliance, but he doesn't seem to know Alec is involved too. Fiore thanks Will, and Will leaves. The voting ceremony arrives, and in a 6-3 vote, Nick is eliminated. Nick curses at his loss before turning it on to the others. After he's done, Will commends him for at least trying to change. Nick scoffs and says it didn't turn out well at all. He should have kept his advice to himself. He leaves without any goodbyes. Will in confessional looks disappointed, saying he'd hoped to help someone, but I guess you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. But Is Nick right? Should he have listened to his own advice? Episode 16. Up in the Air. Jake is sat at a campfire eating breakfast. Tom walks up to him, mad. Jake asks what's up and why he's been avoiding him. Tom tells Jake the thing Gret told him about him being a spy. It used to be true until he got fired yesterday because he proclaimed it, which was recorded and sent to his boss. Jake is horrified and apologizes profusely, saying he didn't know. Natalia and Ellie talk game together, but Ellie seems hesitant to tell Natalia about her position, which makes her suspicious Ellie is playing a better game than she is. In confessional, Natalia wonders who Ellie could possibly be working with. She needs to play harder. Damn! The next morning, Derek and Trevor gather the campers together to greet some familiar faces. Alessio, Drew, Miriam, Ashley, Dan, Diego, Lil, Gabby, Amelie, and Nick. Ellie and Gabby wave at one another, and Ashley winks at Will, making him blush. Trevor explains that each of the 8 finalists has to choose someone to help, with the order decided based on the performance in the previous challenge. Natalia points out the number of losers, to which Derek responds that the challenge will have 2 single riders. Gret picks first, choosing Lil. Everyone is surprised, but Gret says it's a game move. Lil is disappointed. Alec chooses Dan. Ellie chooses Gabby, of course. Fiore chooses Diego. Natalia picks Alessio, wanting to help him get a second chance. Will chooses Ashley. Tom looks between Drew and Miriam, but eventually goes with Miriam, just to spite Jake, who he knows would have chosen her. Jake picks Drew as he was never picking the other 2. With the teams picked, Derek and Trevor explain the challenge. First, they have to find darts buried in the sand and try to hit a target. Once 7 players hit the targets, they will move on to the walk across a tightrope while dodging cannonballs. If they fall, they have to start again. Finally, the players who make it across have to jump into a pool of water below. Then the 4 who make it have to juggle balls while walking to the finish line. They have to restart if the balls hit the ground. The first 2 campers to make it through the whole challenge will be welcomed back into the game. The challenge begins and everyone starts digging. Natalia commissions a Mona Lisa painting of herself from Alessio, but Alessio is more focused on playing a more active role to achieve victory. Diego praises Fiore for making it this far. Fiore gives a side-eye to the camera as he accepts his compliments, saying it was all thanks to him. Diego is flattered as Fiore gestures throwing up when he's looking away. Amelie and Nick team up together as the 2 without teammates, as they share the darts they found on the ground. Ellie and Gabby move over to the dart throwing, where all they do is flirt. Ellie tries her hardest to get Gabby back in the game, but Gabby says it's fine. She just enjoys spending time with her and isn't sure if the game is really the best place for her. Ellie then just challenges her to a game of darts, asking Jake and Drew, who just finished, for their remaining darts. Gret isn't even trying to help Lil, as Lil throws her darts and hits the target. She scoffs at Gret, saying not even the worst kids in a scout is as stuck up as she is. Gret doesn't respond. Most teams make it to the tightrope, which Tom and Miriam seemingly excel at. He compliments her form, and Miriam says she's learned a thing or 2 when she was younger. She's here to win. No more fooling around and getting blindsided by a little girl 10 times younger than her. Will and Ashley reach the tightrope, which Will seems terrified of. Ashley takes the chance to help him over another fear, which slows the 2 of them down. Diego tells Fiore to get on his back. He can do this right before a cannonball manages to avoid Diego and hit Fiore straight in the face. Diego jumps down to help her. Amelie and Nick get to the tightrope, where she leaves him in the dust. Nick said they were a team. They got along so well. Amelie says this is still a game, something she can win and he can't. Nick scoffs. Eventually, in the final part, the remaining contestants are Amelie, Miriam, Dan, and Ashley. Dan drops his balls, which makes Amelie laugh, dropping hers. Miriam easily beats it, earning cheers from both Tom and Jake. Ashley drops her balls right at the finish line as Dan and Amelie race to beat each other there, but only one can come out on top. And that is Dan, meaning the 2 returning contestants are Dan and Miriam. On the dock of losers, Will says his cowardice took away her shot at the game. Ashley reassures him that she'd do it again just to see how far he's come. A coward wouldn't still be in the game. Will smiles. Gabby and Ellie share a kiss as Natalia and Alessio flirt with one another. Drew gives Jake a parting gift of a drawing of his grandma, and Jake tears up and hugs him. Everyone waves the losers off. Episode 17, Dead Weight. The episode starts at the campfire. People are hanging around before Dan and Miriam sneak off together. In the woods, they make an alliance. In confessional, Dan says he's back in the game and this time, he won't take a back seat. On accident. Staying under the radar is really strong, especially since there's so much going on. That is going to be his strength. Miriam says she's back. Ashley and Lil really inspired her to play this game for herself. To get out of the house and do something again after... Her goals for now are to talk to Jake again and vote out the pesky child. Will walks up to Natalia, who's surprised he wants to talk after what she did. He says it's water under the bridge now. He suggests them to work together, and Natalia likes the idea. Natalia takes the chance to apologize to Will about Lil. He accepts as they shake hands. Miriam sits with Jake. Jake updates her on everything that has happened so far, and what alliances he knows about. Miriam thanks him and apologizes for being so harsh before. She's not the best when it comes to new people. She didn't know what she signed up for. Jake accepts her apology and tells her about his own grandma. The two of them grow much closer. Tom is behind the tree, watching. Later on, the swimsuit-clad contestants are gathered together as Derek and Trevor introduce the next challenge. They'll have to hang onto a handlebar high above the water with 3 ropes tied to their bodies. The contestants will also wear lie-detecting helmets and ask each other challenging questions. If anyone lies, the helmet will detect it and a rope from their body will be cut. However, if they tell the truth, then they will cut a rope instead. If a contestant lets go at any point, they'll be eliminated. And the last person standing wins immunity. I randomized the order in which the questions are asked, which turned out to be Will, Jake, Tom, Natalia, Alec, Gret, Ellie, Fiore, Miriam, and then Dan. Will looks around at the contestants, awkwardly smiling at everyone. He hesitantly asks Miriam if she's glad to be in the game. Miriam huffs with a smile and says this is supposed to be a lying challenge, not an icebreaker. Yes, she is glad. Will loses a rope. Jake then glares at Tom, who looks worried, as he asks Tom if he's lied about anything else during this game. He sighs and says he has been. Eyes turn to them as people realize there's tension between the two. Jake loses a rope, looking very upset as he does. Tom turns his head away. He asks Gret if she's proud of how dirty she's been playing. Gret scoffs and says she is. This is a lie, however, much to people's surprise. She loses a rope, which almost gets her to fall already. Natalia asks Alec if he thinks his family would be proud of him, which upsets him, but he relents, saying they probably wouldn't. The truth, so Natalia loses a rope. Alec asks Jake if he's still interested in staying friends with Tom after what he did. Jake sighs and says he hopes they could, which makes Tom smile under his mask. Alec loses a rope. Fiore then asks Miriam if she's still mad at her first elimination. Miriam says she's not mad, just disappointed, mostly in her. This is a lie, causing Miriam to lose a rope. Fiore smiles at her, which sparks something in Miriam. She then claps back, asking Fiore if the sweet little girl act is her true persona. Fiore is shocked and lies, saying it is. Fiore loses a rope. Dan then doubles down on Fiore, asking if he really cursed at her during the dodgeball challenge, because he's certain he didn't. Fiore looks mad and admits she lied, saying she wanted him out because she knew she'd be out instead. Still maintaining her persona, which seems to be faltering with every second that passes. Dan loses a rope. Will then smiles at Dan before speaking. He asks Fiore if she cursed and yelled at him to vote for Gabby instead of Alec. Fiore turns red and stammers. Derek deems this a wrong answer and cuts another one of her ropes, which causes Fiore to go off balance and fall into the water below. Fiore comes out of the water, absolutely fuming. Jake wants to ask Tom again, but keeps his mouth shut. He looks at Gret and asks if her family would be proud of how she's played. Gret looks hurt by the questions and says they should be. Derek deems this a wrong answer for not being clear enough. Gret loses a rope, and she can't hold on any longer, so she falls second. Tom then asks Ellie if she's been playing the game at all. He's barely noticed her. Ellie admits she's been riding the waves a little, but she knows what she's doing. This is true, and Tom loses a rope. Natalia looks around about who to ask. She asks Dan what his strategy is now that he's back. Dan thinks before saying he doesn't know, which is obviously a lie. He loses a rope. Dan in confessional says that was a smart question. No answer would satisfy anyone. Alec then looks over at Natalia. In confessional, Alec admits he's noticed Natalia hanging around a lot of different people. He wonders. He asks Natalia how many alliances she has. Natalia looks surprised and asks why he would ask. Alec says he was just curious. She awkwardly chuckles before saying 1. This is wrong, which makes her allies seem nervous. Ellie asks Will if he's fine all the way up in the air like this. Will hadn't thought about it before he started to hang, and now he looks down, which terrifies him. His grip starts to slip and causes him to fall without even answering. Miriam asks Alec why he decided to align himself with a young child of all people. Alec answers honestly, saying Fiore reminds him of his own kid, and they get along. Miriam squints her eyes as she loses her rope. Dan asks Ellie if she would eliminate her closest ally to save her own skin. Ellie thinks and says she wouldn't. This is caught as a lie, which Natalia and Jake don't seem too happy about. She loses her rope. Jake sighs and asks Tom if their connection even meant anything to him. Tom says it did, but his job... Jake cuts him off, saying he was asking about him, not his job. Tom says yes, it does matter to him. Jake doesn't buy it. He loses a rope. Tom asks Jake if he's still open to being friends. Jake says he is, but it may take some time. Tom is satisfied as he loses a rope. In confessional, Jake says he's still hurt. Tom would accuse him of something he had no idea he'd done. He still wants to be friends, but he's at least hoping for an apology first. Natalia asks Alec how many alliances he has, trying to get him back, but Alec says 2, which is true. Natalia's last rope gets cut, which sends her plummeting down. In confessional, Natalia curses at Alec. How can he be so honest while sounding like a liar? Ellie takes a shot at Tom and asks why he would hurt Jake like that. Tom says he didn't mean to. He was just not thinking right. This is taking at the truth, and Ellie loses a rope. Miriam asks Alec if he prefers his own kid over Fiore. He scoffs, now heavily annoyed at Miriam. He says it's obvious that he does, which is a lie. He says the detector is broken as he loses a rope. Dan asks Tom if he was the one to flip during the guys' alliance in the team phase. Tom sighs and says he was. Gret was blackmailing him to do so. This annoys Gret, sitting on the sidelines. Dan loses a rope and drops, and at the same time, Miriam can't hold any longer and drops as well. Jake asks Alec what kind of game he's been playing. Alec says he's playing the cards he's been dealt with. So he's not sure if there's a good term to describe that. Jake falls into the water below. Tom goes for Alec too, asking him who he deems the weakest player. He says Fiore, obviously, she's a child. But this gets caught as a lie. Alec groans as the last rope is enough to make him drop. Ellie asks Tom what his job was that he was fired from. Tom glances at Trevor and Derek, and then refuses to answer, saying it's very private information. Ellie apologizes. Tom's rope drops. He still holds on, but as he's thinking of a question, his hands slowly slip and he falls. This gives Ellie immunity. Miriam walks up to Tom, who's in deep thought. She tells him if he's thinking about Jake, he should patch things up with him. Tom asks her if she's sure he'll be fine, and Miriam asks if he didn't just hear Jake say he would be friends again. He just needs to gather the courage to do it. Don't let one fight ruin their friendship. Ellie goes up to Natalia and asks for the truth she didn't get to ask during the challenge. With who does she have alliances? Natalia says the alliance with her and the boys, and Will. That's it. Ellie asks if she's sure, and she says she is. Ellie looks worried. In confessional, Ellie admits that Natalia has an alliance with almost half the people here. Is she even trustworthy after playing all sides? Gret asks her alliance to vote Tom. He's of no use to her anymore, but Fiore shuts her down, saying that Tom and Jake are still fighting. That old woman needs to go instead. Alec asks if they have enough votes to make that happen. Then a shadow walks up from behind the trees. The voting ceremony arrives, and in a 5-3-2 vote, Natalia is eliminated. Natalia is shocked at the blind side. She curses at the remaining contestants, though she holds her tongue at Tom, Jake, Will, and Miriam, and her close ally, Ellie, of course. Ellie and Natalia hug, with Ellie looking guilty. In confessional, Ellie admits to setting up the vote against Natalia because it was dangerous to work with someone with so many alliances. Especially with how them two were playing. She does feel terrible for doing it behind her back, but she really does need this money, and Natalia was too good socially. Will in confessional shudders and says betraying an alliance is a thrill, but he would have preferred any other target. That's another alliance gone. It's like a curse. Episode 18. Hell of a Deal. Alec pulls Ellie to the side and asks who she's really loyal to, which Ellie responds with saying she's here for herself. But since him and Fiore are in a pretty good position, she'll work with them. Alex nods and says that's fine. In confessional, he says that the alliance is growing, which is fine, but they can't trust everyone. Ellie seems desperate, however, so they can use her. Tom approaches Jake, much to Jake's surprise. He apologizes for being so rash and shouldn't have aired his grievances at him instead of at himself. Jake says he's thankful for the apology and he'd like to be friends again, which Tom agrees with. Jake then asks about his job and if he's heard anything from them, which Tom denies, asking himself whether he's even good at it or if he even wants to do it anymore. He finally decides he's done with it and takes his mask off, to Jake's shock. He reveals a scarred face, telling Jake how his first job did not go as planned and as his oppressors put them on his body. Jake asks if he was using the mask to hide his identity, but Tom admits he was simply ashamed for failing and of his looks. He says the job was his last chance, and sadly, he blew it. To cheer him up, Jake says Tom looks good, and thinking he's lying just to make him feel better, Tom asks him to stop lying, only for the boy to kiss him on the lips, with Tom leaning in, as he proclaims he really means what he's saying. Dan and Will meet up in the woods, where Dan suggests an alliance. Will says his alliance members tend to get voted out quickly after making one, but Dan reassures him he won't. Will shakes his hand on it, saying he could use one more. Dan says he has a plan, which he whispers into Will's ear. Will nods with a grin on his face. Later that day, Trevor and Emily call the campers together for a new type of challenge, the DISVENTURE Camp Auction. The rules are simple. With $500 each, the campers will have to bid in $20 increments on various items, including food, advantages, and immunity. They won't be allowed to share food, but they will be allowed to lend money to each other, and the auction will end without warning. As an added surprise, the immunity and other advantages will be entered as a blind bid. Fiore and Alec whisper to one another to go for immunity. The first bid is a PB&J sandwich, with Tom buying it for $100, saying he craved something like this. The next item is covered. It's a battle between the most brainiacs, but eventually Gret ends up buying it for $280. She wins a plate of fully loaded nachos and a martini. She says she was going for immunity, but this might be even better. She takes it to her seat, teasing everyone around her with her food. The next item is an undisclosed advantage in the game. Alec and Fiore go for it, but so do Dan and Will, until Fiore throws in her entire stash. Dan subtly asks Will for extra, which he gives. Dan then bets $550. Alex says to just let them have it. Fiore pouts and lets Dan buy it. He's now broke, but gains a steal a vote advantage. The next item remains covered too. Ellie goes for this for $100. Before it's revealed, Trevor asks her if she'd like to switch it for the second covered item. Ellie hesitates, but she says she'll stay with the original item. Trevor chuckles as it's revealed she got a rotten coconut instead of a plate of spaghetti and a bottle of wine. Ellie groans. The next item is a box. Miriam goes for it and bids $400. Alec counters with betting his entire hand. Jake then puts $100 of his in Miriam's hand. Miriam thanks him and bids $600. Fiore rolls her eyes and says to let her have it. Alec complains, saying to help him. Fiore relents and gives him $200, which makes the bid $700. Jake doesn't stop and gives Miriam another $100. This goes on until both bids are at $1,000. Tom then breaks the tie by giving her 50 of his bucks. Fiore groans as Miriam wins the box. Emily announces this is immunity. Miriam thanks Jake and Tom both as Fiore flips off Miriam behind their backs. The next item is a smartphone containing a message from their loved ones. Will bids $300 on it. Jake looks saddened, but feels a hand slide over his. Tom places all of his leftover cash in Jake's hand, telling him to go for it. Jake stands and uses Tom's $350. Will sees Jake's determination and backs down, saying Jake deserves it. Jake thanks him. Jake grabs the phone and starts watching it, full of hope, but instead of hope, he got despair. His brother on his screen is telling him his grandma passed away shortly after he left. She left him a note before her death. Jake crumbles to the floor, making Miriam and Tom rush over as Jake weeps. The two take Jake back to their seats, with Emily then awkwardly taking the stage again and announces the next item is a portable shower. Gret uses her leftover $220, but Alec overshadows her with a bet of $300. Gret scoffs, and Alec says he'd love a shower. Fiore complains to him, saying they were going for immunity. Alex says she still has all of her money, but that quickly gets shut down as Emily announces the end of the auction, which angers Fiore even more. Fiore in confessional says she's not listening to Alec ever again. That four-eyed troll made sure she couldn't get that advantage, tried using her money for immunity for himself, and then went and spent his money on a shower. Ugh. After the challenge, Will walks up to Miriam and asks how Jake is doing. She says he needs time to grieve, but losing a loved one isn't as easy. Will agrees with this. He apologizes before swapping the topic onto the vote tonight. He suggests voting out Gret. Miriam agrees and says she'll talk to the boys. Will nods and leaves. Ellie walks up to Alec, Fiore, and Gret and asks what the plan is tonight. Fiore says Tom. She's already convinced Will. Doesn't mean much as he doesn't have a backbone in his big body. They need to drive Tom and Jake apart, especially now that Jake's weak. Ellie questions if that's the right move. Alex says with Will's vote, they can whittle them down one by one. It doesn't really matter who goes. Gret says Will goes after them, and then it's just between them. The elimination ceremony arrives, and in a 5-4 vote, Gret is eliminated. Gret scoffs, saying she knew the plans had holes in them, she just didn't know they were Ellie-shaped. Ellie stays quiet as Gret insults them one last time as she leaves. In confessional, Will cheers at being on the right side of the vote and being the one to take someone out. It feels great. Alex says either Ellie or Will flipped on them. Depending on who it was, they're in danger the next ceremony. Episode 19, Thief in the Night. Alec approaches Ellie and demands to know if she flipped. Ellie denies it, saying she voted for Tom. She then accuses Will. He hasn't been a loyal the whole time, has he? Alex says it is more believable that he would flip rather than her. Fiore then joins the conversation, saying that's great and all, but they've got a bigger issue. That alliance now outnumbers theirs. She turns to Ellie and tells them she needs to drive a wedge in between Tom and Jake. Ellie is shocked at the idea, saying that's horrible, but Alec presses her desire for money. Ellie says she'll think about it and walks off. Fiore yells after her for her not to be dumb. Jake is sat inside one of the sleeping areas. Tom comes and sits next to him, asking if he's doing alright. Jake says he isn't, but he will be soon. The spy then tells him he'll be in the forest gathering food if he needs anything. Jake nods as he watches him leave. Ellie walks in, looking worried. She asks if Jake can talk. He asks what's up. Ellie then lies to him, saying she's known for a while but didn't know how to bring him up, but Tom has a boyfriend. Jake is horrified at the news, believing Ellie in his vulnerable state. He breaks down in tears again, with Ellie awkwardly comforting him. In confessional, Ellie puts her head in her hands, saying she's doing something awful, but she really needs this money. She probably won't see these people after the game anymore, right? Dan and Will talk game and decide Alec should be the next target, but Fiore is a close second. Tom comes back from the forest, but can't seem to find Jake. Instead, he asks Miriam where he is, and she says she also hasn't seen him. That night, Trevor and Emily gather the contestants together for their next challenge. Emily explains that the challenge will test their fear of the dark. On her go, the contestants will follow a map through the forest and go to marked locations with flags along 2 routes. One through a river and one over a mountain. They must choose a route, grab a flag, and head back. But there's only one winner, so the first person to head back wins. The contestants are handed their maps and bags, filled with basic tools and special items. Half the bags contain empty dart guns, and the other half have the darts, which they must use to rely on each other to get through the challenge. Ellie asks if there's anything else, and Trevor presses a remote to activate a giant animatronic clown that will hunt the campers down and can be stopped with the dart guns, but it can only be stunned for 5 minutes. With that, the challenge begins. Alec and Fiore walk together and realize they both have guns. Fiore groans and says this game doesn't want them working together, does it? Alec says they should split up to try to get bullets, then meet up to go through the river. Fiore agrees and they split. Miriam is talking with Tom about Jake. Tom mentions that he hasn't been able to speak to Jake at all. He's been shrugging him off. Miriam tells him she'll see what's up with him before they hear mechanical noises coming from ahead. They look over to see the giant clown peeking into some bushes. Tom doesn't hesitate, grabbing one of Miriam's darts and his gun to shoot it. Will and Dan pop up from behind the bushes and thank them. Dan asks if they can come along, which Miriam and Tom don't mind. Ellie is walking around alone, until her flashlight suddenly spotlights Fiore, who complains about the brightness of the beam shining into her face. Ellie apologizes before they travel together. Jake is walking alone, looking saddened. He starts to sob on a stump, before being interrupted by the clown, which snatches him up before the tears can even trickle down his face. Alec is in the bushes as the group of 4 walk past. They are discussing the vote tonight. Alec watches as Will suggests him, making him squint his eyes and sigh to himself. The 4 say Fiore and Alec are threats due to their manipulation, but Alec is the worst of it. Tom doesn't understand why Miriam says that, and explains Fiore lied to her about her true nature and has been masterminding votes according to Will's account. Alec is just as bad, but way better physically. Ellie and Fiore walk together. Fiore complains about the trek. Ellie tells her to shut up. They've got a long walk to go. She then starts about the vote, asking what the plan is now. Fiore says she hopes Will can reflect back onto their side, and if Ellie is a good saboteur, she'll have split Tom and Jake. Ellie says she did. They then hear rustling in the bushes, making them hide. A shadow gets cast over the bush they're hiding in, but it just turns out to be Alec. He tells them Will's working with the other alliance, though Jake wasn't with them. Ellie and Fiore look terrified as the clown appears behind Alec. He gets snatched up, but Fiore's quick thinking grabs a bullet from Ellie's hand and shoots the clown. The 3 run. The groups make it to the end. but the clown is hot on their trail. Fiore gets grabbed by the clown, and in a desperate attempt, Alec tries to shoot the clown to free her with his last bullet, but hits Fiore straight in the forehead. Dan trips and loses his glasses before also getting grabbed. It's a mad dash to the finish line, but due to pure agility, Tom is the first to cross the finish line, with Ellie right behind him. After the challenge, Miriam approaches Jake to ask what happened. Jake first refuses to speak, but then rants to Miriam about how Tom was being so nice and caring and flirting with him just to find out he's a boyfriend. Miriam is shocked, but asks Jake if he's sure. Jake says he isn't, but he can't get it out of his head. Miriam suggests speaking to him. Jake stays quiet. Will approaches Fiore and Alec, asking who the vote is going to be tonight. He suggests Jake, as he's very distant and separated from his allies. He gets cut off by Fiore to zip his big mouth. They know he's a traitor, and he's about to learn exactly what traitors get. Will is shocked, but stands his ground, saying he never wanted this alliance anyways. They should have known this would happen. Alex says that may be true, but betraying an alliance is a risky move. He's going home. Will challenges them, saying to try it. The elimination ceremony arrives. Jake wants to approach Tom, but Ellie stops him, asking who he's voting for. Jake says he doesn't really know. Ellie whispers in his ear as they quickly pass Tom, who watches them walk. Then, in a 4-4 vote, Will and Fiore go into the tiebreaker. Will's confident, as Fiore seems a little nervous. Emily explains the tiebreaker challenge. Both contestants will be signed to dunk the hosts. Will is given the option to dunk Trevor, and Fiore gets Derek. It's a close battle. Fiore's complaining and ranting at Will, who shrugs her off. But her words do seem to get to him. Fiore focuses as hard as she can, and after multiple failed attempts, she throws a ball without much thought. It flies through the air and hits the target, dunking Derek into the tank. Will is ashamed to losing to Fiore and yells back at her, saying her words hurt, and he hopes she'll get the karma she deserves to turn her life around. He sighs as he turns around and gives everyone other than Alec a big hug and wishing them good luck. Everyone waves him off as Will leaves the island. Fiore in confessional cheers at Will's failure. She says she probably should have gone home, but Will is still as weak as the first day he got here. Tom asks himself why Ellie was so secretive with Jake all of a sudden. He caught those glances they gave him. Something is up. Episode 20. Pit Stop. Tom approaches Miriam and asks if she's talked to Jake yet. She puts her hand on her hips with a disapproving look before confronting him about his boyfriend. Tom looks surprised before telling her he doesn't have a boyfriend. Miriam backs off, saying Jake believes he does. Tom's confused. He never told him that. Miriam says he should go to clear things up with him. Tom agrees. Dan finds Alec again. He suggests working together. Alec finds the sudden approach suspicious, asking if he didn't just vote with the other group. Dan admits he did, but their alliance is so strong, so he'd rather jump ship. Alex thinks about this and says he'll think about this with Fiore. Tom walks up to Jake and asks to talk. Jake reluctantly agrees. Tom says he heard about what Jake thinks from Miriam, and he's there to tell him he doesn't have a boyfriend. Jake looks surprised and asks if he's really telling the truth. Tom admits he is, and asks why he thought that. Jake looks away before admitting Ellie told him. Tom scoffs and asks why he believed her instead of going to him to make sure, now annoyed at Jake. Jake asks for the forgiveness, saying he made a mistake, and Tom sighs and says he did, but to come to him next time instead of believing someone else. Jake nods as Tom walks off. In confessional, Jake asks himself if Ellie would really lie like that. A lie that serious would be horrible, and Ellie isn't like that. Is she? Later, Emily and Trevor gather the campers together at the corn maze for their next challenge. They'll race through the maze while putting their knowledge of their fellow competitors to the test. They'll do this by coming to a cross-section where they will be faced with a question about an eliminated merge camper. If they get 2 questions wrong, they will be removed from the challenge. and the one who finishes first will win immunity. Miriam asks what happens if no one makes it to the end, and Emily answers that if that happens, no immunity will be given, and there will be a free-for-all vote. During the challenge, Jake approaches Ellie and asks about Tom. He's angry, saying she lied to him about Tom, and that's horrible. Ellie says she knew what she heard. His name is Mike. They were planning a vacation together after this. She tells him to trust her. She just wants what's best for him and not to hold it to herself anymore. The heartfelt speech from Ellie confuses Jake. In the challenge, Fiore falls into the pit, cursing as she does so. Joining her later on are Jake, Miriam, and Dan. Jake asks Miriam about what Ellie said. She asks him if he's talked to Tom. He should listen to what he said and tell him before assuming. Fiore squints her eyes as she listens. The challenge goes on, and I doubt many people would be very good at this since Alec isn't very social, Fiore doesn't care about others, Ellie may have a shot by just floating around, Dan just came back so he doesn't know people very well, Jake has a good shot but he's already in the pit, Miriam has the same reasoning, and I guess Tom also has a shot. It is said there could be no winners, but I don't really like that idea. In the original, only eliminated in the merge were mentioned, and if I look at the contestants here, who would know the most about them, I actually think Alec would win. Many of the eliminated campers are kind of villains, and Alec would probably use his probability or something to guess right. Fiore approaches Ellie after the challenge and tells her she needs to keep Jake away from Tom at all costs. He wants to talk it out, but Jake is unsure of Tom. Ellie sighs and agrees. As she walks off to find Jake, she's approached by Miriam. Miriam scolds her for playing with Jake's feelings and ruining his and Tom's relationship. Ellie says this isn't her battle and that she needs the money, but Miriam says this totally is her battle. Miriam gives a quick rant about greed to Ellie, making her think, as Miriam walks off. The rest of the day, Ellie manages to alienate Jake from the others while telling him more lies until the voting ceremony arrives. In a 4-2 to 1 vote, Miriam is eliminated. She sighs and tells Jake if he really believed Ellie after it all. Tom is confused and Miriam doesn't answer, making Tom realize Jake voted for him. He scoffs at him, telling him if what he says was nonsense to him. Look what he did. Miriam asks Tom to relax, but Tom groans and asks to take Miriam to the dock. Before they can, Emily stops them and announces that Miriam will be heading to the jury. In the final 3, a jury vote will take place where the voted out merge contestants will eliminate someone. Miriam says she knows who she isn't voting before walking with Tom. Fiore laughs evilly in confessional. She says getting rid of that old hag twice is so satisfying. Getting rid of her splits up the last gay couple, making them easy to pick off. Now to make sure Tom won't win immunity and he's gone. Jake whines in confessional, saying he messed up bad. So it wasn't true after all? Ellie did lie to him? That's horrible. And now to watch Miriam leave, knowing it's his fault? God, why is he so gullible? That's it. Ellie, you're on, Jake says, pointing at the camera. Episode 21, Taking New Heights. The episode starts with Alec watching Dan eat on his lonesome. In confessional, Alec admits he helped the guy re-enter the game, but he didn't know how sneaky he truly was. He's the definition of an underdog. He needs to keep an eye on him. Jake tries to approach Tom again, apologizing for what he did, but Tom cuts him off, saying Ellie has nothing to do with this. She lied to him, but he decided not to tell him or ask him again. He believed someone else at face value. Jake tears up, saying he gets it. Tom asks to leave him alone, which Jake reluctantly does. Later that day, Trevor, Emily, and a returning Derek gathered the campers together. When everyone stands on the mat, Fiore grins to herself. In confessional, she takes a deep breath in and sighs, saying, "You smell that? It's the sweet scent of tension," and she's not in the middle of it. Emily then explains that the challenge will be a 2-parter that will be done in pairs, so 2 campers will win immunity. Ellie calls her out for this idea, but Emily says she wanted to start drama and already decided the teams. Ellie and Jake, Fiore and Tom, and finally Alec and Dan. Dan and Alec share suspicious glances at one another. Tom and Fiore look disappointed, and Jake groans at being paired with Ellie, which Ellie rolls her eyes at, tells him to get over it. Jake turns to her, but Emily cuts him off. Emily explains the first part of the challenge. One member will stand in a cart of the Ferris wheel, while the other member stays on the ground wearing target helmets. The Ferris wheel players have to throw balls at the opposing team's targets, while the players on the ground dodge. Once they've hit a target player 3 times, they get to move on to the next round, wherein ground players must blindfold themselves and search for 3 balls while their partner guide them. After gathering 3 balls, the teams must work together to solve a puzzle by tilting the balls into the holes. The first team to finish wins immunity. Ellie, Tom, and Alec are in the Ferris wheel. Ellie and Jake make it to the second area first, with Tom and Fiore right behind them. Alex throws the balls, but he can't seem to hit. He apologizes to Dan, who gets suspicious. Ellie and Jake are too busy bickering in the second part of the challenge as Ellie guides him. Tom and Fiore don't like one another and also bicker, but still manage to work together to get to the second part, as Alec and Dan finally make it to the second part. Dan manages to grab 3 balls on his own without Alec's help. Dan realizes Alec is throwing the challenge on purpose for some reason. Alec apologizes again, which Dan shrugs off. Ellie and Jake finally make it to the last part in last place. But in the end, Tom and Fiore actually, but reluctantly, working together gives them the win, with Alec and Dan in second and Ellie and Jake in last place. In confessional, Dan says he's in danger. Alec threw that challenge, and there would be no reason for him to do that unless he's trying to vote him out. Alec and Dan discuss the vote, where they agree to vote Jake before leaving, keeping a suspicious eye on one another. After out of eyesight, they look forward, determined. He approaches Tom and says he's willing to vote with him tonight if he'd like. He noticed him and Jake aren't on the best terms right now, but he hopes they can patch things up again. He suggests voting Ellie to get rid of the root of the issue. Tom thinks and agrees to vote with him. He then moves on to Jake, where Dan tells Jake to listen. He had a hand in Miriam's elimination, yes, but he'd like to help him take out an enemy tonight. Jake thinks and agrees. Dan whispers him his plan. Alec tells Fiore and Ellie they need to vote Dan tonight. His advantage is too strong to keep around. He needs to go now. Fiore says, "That string bean?" Alec says with that advantage, he can take whoever he wants with him to the finale. Fiore and Alec look at one another as if confirming something. The vote begins. Alec and Dan give each other a small nod without emotion. Before the votes are cast, Dan stands up to use his advantage. Alec looks worried as Dan steals Ellie's vote. The 3 look at one another, then at Tom and Jake, who are now just deciding voters. Alec tells Fiore to pivot. She gives them a nod. The votes are in, and in a vote of 3 to 2 to 1, Alec is eliminated. He gets up, visibly frustrated at being outplayed by Dan. He tells him he shouldn't have ever helped him get back into the game. Tom, Fiore, and Ellie are all very surprised at this turn of event. Dan tells him he shouldn't have thrown the challenge. He made it too obvious. Alec clenches his fists and storms off. Fiore runs after him. At the dock, Fiore tells him she enjoyed her time with him. Alec looks down at her and asks if she's serious. She says she is, unfortunately. Alec tells her to win this. He knows she can. Fiore says it's already in the bag for her. Alec hops onto the boat and Fiore waves him off. Episode 22. Dunces and Dragons. Tom approaches Dan and asks him why he told him to vote Ellie. He wasn't interested in helping him patch up things with Jake at all. Dan apologizes to Tom and admits it was for his own game, but now that Alec is gone, he has more chance to fix it with him. He saves Jake from going home. In confessional, Tom says Dan told him to vote Ellie so that they can get rid of the one behind their issues, and then he votes off Alec? Maybe he isn't that different to Jake after all. Now he feels how it is being lied to. Jake and Ellie bump paths again. Jake wants to ignore her, but Ellie starts the conversation, saying that sulking over this won't get him anywhere. Jake asks how being lied to about his almost boyfriend having a boyfriend and her inadvertently ruining their relationship isn't something to sulk over. Ellie says he ruined his own relationship. Miriam was right. He could have gone to him and talked things out, but he just believed her. Jake says because he thought they were friends. What she did was terrible. Ellie rolls her eyes. Both then look away, seeming conflicted. In confessional, Ellie says she feels bad. She really does. She never thought she'd stoop this low, but she was right. Jake could have gone to Tom. He should have fact-checked. It isn't her fault. Later on, Emily gathers the final 5 in the production tent for their next challenge. Jake asks where Trevor is, and she explains that he and Derek were monitoring through their headsets and reveals the ever-familiar VR headsets that the campers will wear. Ellie wonders if they'll be superheroes, but Emily explains further. The contestants will start at the bottom of a castle, and their goal is to get to the throne room. And the first person to sit on the throne wins. Dan excitedly asks if the genre is what he thinks it is, and Fiore scoffs at the easiness of this challenge. But Emily teases a few surprises while stressing they need to stick together. Emily then hands the contestants the headsets and the simulation begins. They enter the simulation and the roles are as followed: Tom the warrior, Dan the ranger, Jake the cleric, Fiore the barbarian, and Ellie the mage. Dan is excited. This is exactly what he thought, saying they're playing the tabletop RPG game Towers and Titans. Fiore is immediately attacked by a troll and runs away. Tom saves her in time, earning him a reluctant thanks from Fiore. Ellie walks through the room and discovers a chest. She looks around and opens it, but Dan is too late at warning her as the mimic kills her. The remaining 4 walk down the hall and Fiore and Dan fall behind. Dan says he knows he may not be their favorite right now, but they can agree that Tom can't win, right? Fiore agrees. Jake tries to make small talk with Tom, who's more receptive to it than before, but gives dead-end answers while looking sad, which makes Jake back down again. They open the door where a giant bird-like dragon appears, as Dan ponders the riddle. He thinks he knows it and tries to sneak past the cockatrice, only for it to turn him into stone and destroy him. The remaining 3 have to fight it, with Jake staying back, not really knowing how to help. Fiore and Tom try to fight as Fiore yells at Jake to solve the riddle. Jake stares at it before hearing a yell. Tom is getting attacked. Before he can be turned to stone, Jake hits him with a beam of light, which sends Tom down the chasm. Jake yelps as he runs over just to see Tom laying on a magic platform. Fiore pushes him down the abyss and jumps after him, saying this must be what the riddle means. Jake complains at her pushing him, and she scoffs, saying she saved his life. Tom groans, and Jake asks if he's fine. Tom says he is, and thanks Jake for helping him, with an earnest smile. They enter the throne room. It's a free-for-all. Fiore is the first to realize this, and runs for it, but is quickly tackled by Jake. He tells Tom to go for it, which he does, but Fiore doesn't go down easily. She throws her battle axe at Tom, hitting him in the back. He crumbles to the floor, bleeding. Jake gets off of Fiore and towards Tom. He takes out the axe and heals him, but this allows Fiore to get back up and take a seat in the throne, earning her immunity once again. Jake sighs, but Tom thanks him as they're whisked back to reality. Later that afternoon, Fiore tells Ellie that Jake and Tom are making up again. One of them needs to go. Ellie says Fiore cuts her off, saying it's Tom. They're voting Tom. Ellie says, right. Tom approaches Jake and apologizes to him about treating him like that the past few days. He made the mistake of getting so angry at him. While he isn't very happy about Jake believing Ellie over him, he'd like a second try at being friends. Jake tells him he'd love that, but would he ever be open to being more? Tom stays silent for a bit, before saying he needs time before that can happen. Jake agrees, but is glad they can at least be friends again. The voting ceremony arrives, and in a 3-2 vote, Tom is eliminated. He sighs and says he knew it was coming. Jake offers to walk him out. They have a friendly goodbye, and Tom says he's rooting for him. In confessional, Jake says he's all alone now. Him versus the world. He's not letting Ellie or Fiore get under his skin or use him again. He's here to win now. No distractions. Episode 23, Panel of Peers. This is another non-elimination episode, so I'll go over it quick. Natalia and Alessio start a romance. Yes, I do think Natalia and Alessio should have been officially together. Will, Ashley, and Lil are proud of Will's game. Gret and Amelie bond more, Amelie being fine with Gret's betrayal. Nick joins the two, but the two just enjoy bullying him. Miriam is happy Tom managed to fix things with Jake. Alec is a lone wolf, as always. Diego, Drew, and Gabby are a little friend group now. They help Gabby with her other self, even if they don't fully understand it yet. Gabby gathers every after-merged eliminated contestant, and the rest in the pool area, to talk about the remaining contestants and who they are rooting for and why it's Ellie. Tom says it's definitely not Ellie, with Miriam agreeing. They're fully on Jake's side. Amelie scoffs, says he's weak and hasn't made any moves at all. He doesn't deserve it, unlike the other three. Fiore has her vote. Gret agrees, saying that little girl has fight in her, even if she's weaker than Nick. Nick yells, "Hey!" from one of the loungers. Alec also wants Fiore to win. She's made a lot of moves that people credited him for. She's been playing a better game than people think. Dan, however, isn't. Will laughs and says he's just salty Dan got him voted off. Will is on his buddy's side. He's an underdog and took out the biggest threat. Gabby then asks if no one is on Ellie's side. Miriam tells her if she knows what she did. Gabby looks saddened and says she does understand, but she really needed the money? Natalia says she's on Ellie's side, but it's getting harder and harder, girl. Episode 24, Hit the Brakes. Jake is at the beach, working out. Dan walks up to him, surprised. He asks why he's suddenly so hyped. Jake says he isn't hyped. He is determined. He's not losing today's challenge because he knows he'll go home if he does. Dan tells him not to overexert himself, otherwise he'll lose for sure. Jake gives him a glare, which makes Dan leave. In confessional, Dan says Jake's right. If he loses, he's going home. Ellie and Fiore bond a little more. Ellie says they might go home tonight, but Fiore is sure she won't. She's too little of a threat. Ellie says she's definitely little, earning a groan from Fiore. Later that day, the final four are led into a neon-lit tent where Emily and Trevor reveal the next challenge: bumper cars. They then explain the rule changes. Each time one camper bumps into another, they receive a point. Hit to the backs are worth 1 point, side bumps are worth 2, and head-on collisions are worth 3, which the offensive driver earns if it's an ambush, but both are null if it's equal. The first person to 20 points wins. The campers get in their respective cars and the challenge begins. Fiore says this is rigged against her. She can't even... She gets hit by Jake, who says that's too bad. Fiore asks what his problem is. Dan drives up to Ellie and tells her to target Jake. She agrees. Jake gets thrown around a bunch, earning Dan and Ellie points as Jake tries to keep up. He calls them pathetic for ganging up on him. Ellie says he was pathetic when he was crying during the auction. Even Fiore realizes that was a horrible thing to say, as Dan gestures to her to cut it out. Ellie scoffs and says she was right, and he should Jake looks furious as he hits her head on, earning 3 points. He stays quiet as he locks in, ramming Fiore and Dan head on as well. He gets hit a few times, but it doesn't matter much as he climbs back up from rock bottom. Jake is in second place with Ellie in first, Dan in third, and Fiore in last. Ellie tells Dan to help her win, which Dan reluctantly agrees to. The fight is close, with Ellie barely staying in first, with Jake slowly climbing up to her. Jake then drives straight at Ellie, who notices him and plans to turn in the last second, but Jake turns earlier than her, which surprises Fiore as she gets hit head-on by Jake, officially putting him in first place. One more hit, and Jake wins. Ellie hits Dan on the side, which ties them up. Before Ellie can look back at the battlefield, Jake is on her side. He gets hit by Fiore. Ellie thanks her as she drives to go hit Fiore, but Jake comes out of nowhere and in full force knocks into her side, earning him immunity. He cheers and tells the other three to suck it. The three look at one another as they realize they'll have to campaign against one another. In confessional, Jake cheers again, saying he's in the final three, baby. He's got a plan to ensure his spot in the finale, but how is he gonna make that work? From here, we see a montage of Fiore talking to Dan, Ellie talking to Fiore, Jake talking to Ellie, which seems to be going horrible, Dan talking to Jake, until the final speech, which is Jake to both Fiore and Ellie. In confessional, Fiore says she'd rather go against Dan in the finale. He's the weakest. But can she really beat him in a jury vote? Ellie says Fiore needs to be in the finale with her. If she can get Dan to go home now, and somehow get Jake out in the jury vote, she's won. Dan says he'd like Fiore in the finale, obviously, she's a kid. Jake should be voting Ellie like he said. They hate each other. Now hoping Jake actually goes along with it. Jake says it's obvious Fiore isn't going home, and he should want her in the finale, but he's determined to win, and he's going to do it against Ellie. He needs to see Ellie watch him win. Watch him beat her in a game that she poured her all into. That would be satisfying. The voting ceremony rolls around. The final four have all campaigned against one another, so the atmosphere is tense. But in the end, one person will lose the battle of wits. And in a 3-1 vote, Dan is eliminated. He groans, saying, "So close!" He asks why they would vote him over Ellie. Jake says he needs to beat Ellie himself, making her roll her eyes. Ellie then says it was him or her, and she chose herself. Fiore says he's a bigger jury threat. Dan sighs, but is satisfied with the answers, but still heavily disappointed he lost. The final three wave him off as he walks off. In confessional, Dan admits playing this game like this was good, he just got unlucky. But still, he's proud of what he achieved. Episode 25, Judge, Jury, and Executioner. The episode opens on the final three campers sitting around the campfire in an awkward silence with Ellie and Fiore on one side and Jake on the other. Fiore asks him what he's so jolly about, and Jake says he already knows he's got this in the bag. Ellie scoffs, saying he's awfully confident for a guy who's only won one immunity. Jake shrugs. Jake in confessional says he's sure he's locked in for the final two, and he loves rubbing it into the other two's faces. They don't know it yet, but they're doomed. Emily then arrives to start the finale and tells the trio to head to the elimination area to introduce a new twist, saying she was given the freedom to spice things up. Emily tells the final three that they'll have to vote for which one of them to get a disadvantage in the next challenge. Emily then announces that each of the finalists will be given a chance to explain to the others why they shouldn't be given the advantage, or who they think should get one, before the final vote. Ellie is up first and tells Fiore that Jake is the obvious choice here. She's less of a threat, like Jake said. Fiore takes it into account. It's her turn, and Fiore says they should be voting each other. She's already at disadvantage because of her age and height. It would make no sense to vote her. Jake is up next and says he doesn't care. Ellie and Fiore look at one another, suspicious. In confessional, Fiore asks what this dumbass is doing. He's so determined yesterday, but now he's acting like a total douchebag. I think he's gone mad. The three write down their votes, and in a 2-1 vote, Jake gains the disadvantage. Fiore asks why he would vote her, and Jake shrugs, saying he has his reasons. The next morning, the final three are gathered for their next challenge. Emily explains that Derek and Trevor are busy getting the grand finale ready, leaving her in charge. Emily then explains the challenge. The competitors have to bungee jump off the non-operational drop tower and take a selfie without the slightest hint of fear on their faces. In addition, they'll have to make a jump from the halfway point. Since Jake got the disadvantage, he'll have to climb all the way up to the top and get the picture if he wants to win immunity. Fiore groans, saying this is rigged again. Ellie says she's a kid. They climb, don't they? Fiore scoffs. The challenge starts, and everyone runs for the truss. They get to the platform where, before Jake can continue upwards, he gets pushed off by Ellie. Fiore and Ellie laugh at him. The two jump and take pictures, but both Ellie and Fiore didn't smile convincingly enough. Jake is at the halfway point again and looks down. a devious grin on his face. Fiore and Ellie mock one another as they climb up before Fiore is yoinked off of the tower by a falling Jake. Fiore protests, saying this isn't fair and to let her go. He safely puts her on the ground as they reach it. Jake says he's just making sure she's okay. Fiore says to stop it, but Jake refuses. He holds her back as Ellie jumps. She fails again. Ellie asks what Jake is doing. Why are you stopping Fiore from winning? Ellie raises an eyebrow. Jake reveals he's beating her in the final 2. The child doesn't fit. Ellie scoffs. In confessional, Ellie says Jake's sure he can beat her in the final challenge, but that's a lot of confidence for a guy who's been played like a fiddle for half the merge. His own cockiness will be the death of him. Fiore yells at Jake, telling him to let her go up. Jake says he won't. Fiore bites his hand, which makes Jake flinch and move. Fiore takes her chance to climb up, taunting Jake on her way up. Jake groans and throws his phone at Fiore, which hits her, making her lose her grip. Ellie jumps and manages to take a good picture. The two of them both reach the floor at the same time, Fiore's face boiling red in anger. Ellie wins immunity, sending Jake and Fiore to plead their cases in front of the jury. Fiore says that was the most unfair challenge ever, and Jake tells her to relax. Fiore storms off. Ellie tells Jake he's making a horrible mistake. Fiore might go home tonight, but she's beating him in the end. Jake and Ellie stand face to face where Jake tells her to try him. That night, the jury is welcomed. Amelie, Nick, Natalia, Gret, Will, Miriam, Alec, Tom, and Dan. Emily elaborates by having the other members ask the bottom 2 questions about the competition. The jury questions Fiore and Jake. Amelie asks what makes their game superior to the other. Jake says he's been through a lot during the game. He lost his grandma, made mistakes in his friendships, and made enemies, but overcame them all and eventually blindsiding Dan and winning immunity when it mattered most. Him in this seat was also a strategic decision, he says, smiling at Fiore next to him. Fiore scoffs. She then says she was the mastermind behind many votes. Both of Miriam's eliminations, Dan's first elimination, Gabby, Will, and Tom were all her call. Plus, she won immunity twice, something Jake can't say. Tom comes up and asks Fiore who the real her is. The girl they saw was an act, right? Fiore scoffs and says this is her. Tom frowns. Nick asks the two of them if they were ever loyal to him. Jake and Fiore both look confused and say, no. Nick asks, what? I thought we had an alliance. Fiore says he was Gret's +1, and Jake says he only made that alliance so they'd have the numbers. Nick groans. Miriam takes the stand and asks Fiore if she made any actual bonds, or if everyone there was just a means to an end. Fiore says Alec was her friend. That's all she really needed. Natalia comes up and apologizes to Jake for losing someone during the game, and asks how he managed to keep going. Jake says with the help of his friends. If Miriam and Tom weren't there, he'd have struggled a lot more, but they helped him realize he can't let grief stop him and that he's determined to win this for her. Natalia wipes a fake tear from her eye and says, beautiful. Will asks what happened in Fiore's past to make her so cold. Fiore says, geez, going for the throat much? And says it's none of his business. Emily offers them one final speech before the voting begins. Jake stands and says he played this game with heart on his sleeve, which hurt him, but helped him too. He played an honest game, standing by his allies. He fell for lies, but managed to repair his connections. He hopes his loyal game convinces them to vote for Fiore. Fiore says she played ruthless and cunning because it worked. She took out many contestants as a 6-year-old. She won 2 immunities and still made it all the way to the end, so the excuse of her not being a physical threat is irrelevant. Just to think about who played a better game. The jury casts their votes. Tom reveals he voted for Fiore, saying Jake deserves it more. Being a good person still matters, even in a game this harsh. Alec votes for Jake, saying Fiore is the better player overall. What has Jake really done to except be nice? Nothing, really. Nick looks around, unsure. He says he doesn't know. Oh gosh. He needs to pick, don't he? The next vote is for Jake. Then, Fiore. Fiore. Jake. Jake. Fiore. And the last vote goes to Fiore. You have been eliminated. Fiore groans, gets up, and yells at the jury, calling them dumb for giving Jake a pass for doing nothing. Gret turns to Nick and asks who he voted for. Nick gives her the finger, telling her the opposite of what they wanted. Carmen's a bitch, ain't it? Fiore keeps throwing her tantrum towards the docks, with Alec following slowly behind her. In confessional, Jake takes a deep breath. He says he was worried he fucked up. He thought it was certain he would win the jury vote, but that final vote was all luck. He really needs to get it together now. He can beat Ellie. Right? Ellie in confessional says Jake wanted to verse her in the finale, then a challenge he shall get. She's winning that money, and no twink will stand in her way. Episode 26. All Out, All Over. The episode begins with Alec comforting an enraged Fiore. This doesn't amount to much until Alec stops talking, and they stare at the sky together, where Fiore reveals a little about her parents. Alec tells her about his family, which brings them closer. The next morning, Jake and Ellie keep their distance, giving each other glares. Both tell the viewer they'll win this final challenge, while also revealing they're nervous as they doubt themselves. Later that day, Ellie and Jake walk up to the final challenge area, where everyone else is waiting. Fiore, Dan, Alec, Gret, Amelie, Natalia, and Gabby are all rooting for Ellie. And Tom, Miriam, Will, Nick, Lil, Diego, Ashley, Drew, and Alessio are rooting for Jake. Derek, Emily, and Trevor announce the final challenge, a simulated rescue mission. Trevor tells the story of how the Stawaki Carnival closed down to major freak accidents, including a dead body found on the Action water slide. Emily then explains that the final challenge will recreate the carnival's final day of operation. With the helper of their choosing, the finalists have to race through the carnival to complete the rescue mission. First, they'll head through the corn maze to find the keys to an ambulance and drive it to the haunted house to pick up a stretcher. Then, they'll head to the pirate ship and climb to the Action water slide and slide down. They'll swim to the middle of the lake and rescue a drowning mannequin and bring it back to the shore with their partner. Then put it on the stretcher to the ambulance. After that, the first finalist to drive it back to the starting area wins the challenge, the game, and the $1 million. The finalists choose their partners. Ellie picks Gabby and Jake picks Tom. Fiore makes a comment of how it's a battle between the gays and the lesbians. How exciting. With that, the final challenge begins and the two teams run into the maze. The two duos look around and have difficulty finding the keys until Tom tells Jake to get on his shoulders. Jake says that's a good idea and looks around. Ellie sees this and copies Tom's idea, asking if she can get on Gabby's shoulders. She agrees, but is way less stable as Gabby struggles. Tom and Jake gets close to their scarecrow, but Ellie on Gabby's shoulders had grabbed a coconut. She tosses it and knocks down their scarecrow, which disorients the two guys. Jake yells at Ellie, who only sticks her tongue out to him. Tom grabs the coconut and throws it up and down a bit before smiling at Jake. Ellie and Gabby manage to get their key first, with the two guys not far behind. The girls enter the haunted house where Gabby asks Ellie why she did what she did. Ellie asks what she means as she searches, and Gabby says she didn't do the right thing when telling Jake that about Tom. That wasn't nice at all. Ellie sighs and says she knows, but she needs this money. This could fix the rest of her life. No more working 2 jobs and no more student loans. Gabby looks conflicted as Jake and Tom run into the building. Jake insults Ellie one last time for knocking down his scarecrow as they run past. Tom suggests to check the library first, since they're both familiar with only that room. Jake agrees. To their luck, that's where their stretcher lays. The two avoid the books and candles flying at them, Tom using the stretcher as a shield. Ellie and Gabby run all the way through towards the doll room where the doll attacks them again. But Gabby doesn't take this lightly after it hits Ellie. She throws it across the room in anger as they run out with their stretcher. Tom and Jake make it to the water slide first, where Tom tells Jake he's over their fight and he'd love to stay friends actually. Maybe even more. Jake thanks him and they hug. But as they do, Tom warns him that Ellie has already gone down the slide as Gabby waves her off. Jake quickly goes down as well. The two dive together. Ellie tries to sabotage Jake again, but Jake manages to get his mannequin before she can do anything. The two race to land and sprint to the ambulances. Gabby and Tom help the two load their mannequins in before waving them off. Gabby takes the time to apologize to Tom for Ellie's behavior. Tom tells her she shouldn't have to apologize for her girlfriend's actions. Gabby agrees, but feels bad anyways. Tom says it's okay, and he's sure they can make it up with Ellie. Gabby smiles and hugs him. He hugs her back. The two finalists are neck and neck as they drive past the season's challenges and the combined shelter, but they encounter the clown animatronic, which they have to drive over a ramp to get past. They both succeed. Ellie tries to cut Jake off as she speeds up. Jake notices in time and speeds up also. They're neck and neck again. Jake looks ahead as they speed towards the finish before his eyes roam over the passenger seat. The coconut Tom gave him from the first portion of the challenge sits there. Jake grabs it and opens his window. He tosses it at Ellie's window, causing her to jump. She starts to swerve, which allows Jake to overtake her. Ellie notices she's going to hit a tree and hits the brakes, but it won't be enough to make her stop in time, which makes her jump out of the ambulance to avoid the incoming crash. As this happens, Jake races across the finish line. The winner of DISVENTURE Camp, Carnival of Chaos, is Jake. His supporters cheer him on from the stands as Gabby and Tom sprint over to the crashed ambulance in fear, but Ellie walks out from behind it with only a scratch on her arm. Jake cheers at his win as Miriam hugs him and congratulates him. Gret and Amelie agree to do business, with Gret having finally admitted to not having a job, which Amelie shrugs off, saying she can get her one. Tom and Jake agree to meet up again, where Miriam says she found a beautiful vacation home somewhere in Rome they could visit. Natalia sits with the sulking Ellie and Gabby and reassures her this isn't the end. She was struggling too before getting into PR. Trust her, girl. It'll only go up from here. Ellie says she wants to believe that. Gabby says they're going to take her mind off of things after they leave, which Ellie thanks her for. The two kiss again, with Natalia excitedly clapping behind them. Diego invites Drew to come visit the safari park he works at, which Drew loves the idea of. Alessio wants to join, saying nature is what inspires him the most. Natalia runs up and says she'll join too, as she hugs Alessio. Will, Lil, and Ashley plan on meeting together again, where Ashley asks Will to join her at the ranch a while. Will agrees, but says he needs to see his family first. She agrees. Nick looks at the rest and scoffs to himself, saying he doesn't need anyone anyways, and walks off, getting on the helicopter that's there to whisk them away. That is the end of Season 4. What did you think? Are you satisfied with the outcome? Tell me in the comments. And on top of that, let's talk All-Stars. Who from the 3 seasons are All-Star worthy? Who has motive to come back? Who doesn't? Who do you just want to see be included? Please also put that in the comments below. I'll be making another community post as well, but more comments, more suggestions, always appreciated. Thank you for watching, and I hope I will see you guys during the first part of All-Stars. Goodbye!